Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're going to be doing another episode of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights. We take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making and use this as an opportunity to take a look at some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. And today we got part 83. It still blows my mind that we've got this many parts going, but I've got up to 93 planned, so yet another 10 more parts over the next couple weeks, so that'll be really awesome for learning about all sorts of cool animals. But today what we're going to be having a look at is a lot of fish. There's like a bird, but we got lots and lots of fish that we're going to be talking about today, which is going to be pretty awesome. So we're going to be starting off today with a small but quite common fish. This one was done by Leaf and Buffzoo, and I think Blue Mesh. A lot of these are kind of ports from models from fish models from other games and the internet, things like that. But we're going to be starting off with the Dwarf Gourami. So have a look at this really cool guy. So this is the Dwarf Gourami, which is a species of gourama that is native to South Asia. So these guys are native to Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. However, they are also widely distributed out of its native range because of obviously people keeping them as tropical pet fish, and sometimes they get released and survive in some pretty warm areas. And they typically like to inhabit slow-moving waters in rivulets, streams, and lakes, and they often occur in areas with plenty of vegetation. So in terms of their anatomy and size, these guys reach a length of about 8.8 centimeters, or about 3.5 inches in total body length. And male dwarf gouramas, as you can see, they have these stripes with these alternating like blue and green alternating patterns going down them. And females tend to be a little bit more silvery, but it's kind of hard to see here because there isn't really a female model, it seems. But still really, really interesting. Despite these differences, the sex can be determined by the dorsal fin, with the male having a pointed dorsal fin and... the male having a pointed dorsal fin and the female's one's more rounded and curved. And they also have touch-sensitive cells on their thread-like pelvic fins that allow them to like feel things with touch. And they are sold in fish stores sometimes that can be solid colors, so different varieties, but they're mainly just captive bred color morphs. Which because they are quite common in the hobby. And another thing as well, very similar to the archerfish, these guys can actually project a stream of water from its mouth to hunt prey from above the surface, such as small insects and things like that. And they actually have a maximum distance of about 5 centimeters, so that's pretty interesting. That's why they kind of like areas with lots of vegetation. In terms of food, before being introduced into the aquarium trade, these guys, along with the snakeskin gourami, were a popular fish food. And there's lots of different dialects as well. And in terms of their aquarium kind of life, these guys are generally peaceful fish, and they can live mostly with lots of other fish like plecos, docile fish, things like that, and they need at least 10 gallons. And they actually do not do well with large aggressive fish, and even Siamese fighting fish or betas, they don't do well with them. In terms of their nutrition, a varied diet is very important. They're an omnivore, so in the wild they'd eat lots of like small insects, algae, things like that, but in captivity you can feed them algae-based flake food along with brine shrimps and things like that. Bloodworms are a good example. And in terms of breeding, males will build a floating bubble nest in which the eggs are laid, and unlike the other bubble nests builders, these guys will incorporate twigs and plants and other debris to hold the nest together. And they typically, the wood level should be reduced to about 7 to 10 centimeters during spawning, and approximately about 28 to 30 degrees Celsius, or 86 degrees Fahrenheit, where they typically like it. With vegetation essential, as the males will usually use to build their bubble nests on plants and things like that, and use that to breed. And then, once the nest has been built, the male will begin courting the female, particularly in the afternoon or evening, where he signals his intentions with his fins, and they have a courtship display. And then they'll circle the bubble nest, and kind of when she's ready to spawn, the male will either back or the tail of her mouth. So when the male will embrace the female, turning on her side and finally on her back, and they will release approximately 5 dozen clear eggs, which are then fertilized by the male, and then these eggs will float up to the bubble nest. And the eggs will stay there, and they're collected by the male, and the male kind of securely takes care of them, things like that. And often if more than one female is in a breeding tank, the male will spawn with all of them. This spawning session can do about 2 to 4 hours, and they can have between 300 and 800 eggs, with dwarf gouramis having a fecundity of about 600 eggs sometimes, on average. And the males will protect the eggs and fry using this bubble of eggs as well. And in 12 to 24 hours, these fry will hatch, and they'll continue their development in the bubble nest. And after 3 days, they are sufficiently developed enough to free swim and leave the nest. And when the fry are 2 to 3 days old, the male should be removed because he may actually consume them. But for those first few days, he should be right. But yeah, really, really awesome fish, Dwarf Gourami. Also considered least concern because it's got quite a wide range, quite common in the pet trade, and even invasive in some places. But yeah, really, really awesome fish. So this was done by Leaf, Buffzoo, and Blue Mesh. Next one has been a couple ports from Fishing Planet by Leaf and Buffzoo as well. We've got the blue Lambo. Maybe say that. Labeo. I'm going to say Labeo. I think that's probably the best way to say it. So the Labeo, the scientific name is Labeo cordura, which is the purple Labeo, or Labeo. These guys are a type of carp in the family Cremonidae, which is minnows and carps. And their name means in Latin kind of one who has large lips. So you can see they got these quite big lips here. That's where they get their name. So these guys are freshwater, and they are bethnopelagic, so they kind of like open waters and tend to hang out during this low bottom, like deep parts of the water near the bottom. And they're polydromous, so they will migrate up rivers and stuff like that during this breeding season and stuff like that. So their typical habitat reaches about 22 to 26 degrees Celsius in terms of their water, so it's kind of subtropical to tropical. And they typically live in Africa. So these guys live in the Zambezi River and the Irikimoni system. These guys can be found in rivers such as the Zambezi, the Ludi rivers, also rivers of Tanzania as well, and also some rivers in the Congo Basin they can be found in. So they're quite a wide range. And these guys can reach a size and weight of about 41.5 centimeters snout length for a male or unsexed. And the maximum published weight for these guys is about 4 kilograms. But other than that, that's kind of extreme individual. But 4 or 5 kilograms, not the biggest fish in the world, but still really cool. And in terms of biology, they tend to live in areas with a strong flowing rocky stretches of large rivers. So that's where they kind of like to hang out. They're typically herbivores, so they will graze on algae from rocks and Auschwitz, Aufwishes, how do you even say that? So the type of plant that they will typically graze on. They graze it from rocks and also from the backs of hippos, which it leads to these tracks that you can kind of see on hippos sometimes from the grazing from these fish. And they will migrate upstream into swollen rivers to breed, and they can occur in either sailfin or normal varieties. This is kind of typically a normal variety. And they are considered least concern. So they're a species that is quite common in their range and doing okay. And yeah, they're sometimes hunted for game fish and subsistence, but obviously that doesn't really impact their populations too much, it seems. So another really awesome fish. This is the purple Labeo, done by Leaf, Buffzoo, and Fishing Planet. And now we're going to move on to the other species, they're kind of the companion to this. So we've got two species. So we have got the red-nosed Labeo. So this is a really interesting fish. You can see the main differences here. The other one is much more like purplish to like bluish in color. These guys are like yellowish with a red nose, hence the name the red nose. These guys are from the same family, and they're also native to Africa. They live in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Mozambique, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. These guys typically get about a little bit smaller. They're typically about 27 centimeters in length at maturity, but they've been known to get a little bit larger than the purple, about 49 centimeters, and about 3.6 kilograms in weight, so a little bit longer, a little bit shorter, a little bit different in that regard, and they actually have a maximum reported age of about 9 years old. And the species is widely distributed across lots of African river systems and lakes. They've been found in the Congo, the Shire, Zambezi, Savi, Buzi rivers, and things like that. And they undertake a migration through the river systems and the tributaries during the raining season as well. And in some areas, such as the Shire River in Malawi, they actually will spawn in floodplains and swollen rivers and things like that, which is really cool. And very similar to its other relative, the purple Labeo. These guys are bethnopelagic, so they typically move through deeper waters over the substrate, and they graze on algae and wishes, how you say that. And they're also, like their relative, a common food fish in some parts of their range. And in spawning events, they can create these large aggregations of adult fish. and they actually may migrate to these shallow regions, and that's where they're easier to catch, and they're also collected for caviar. But overfishing has occurred in some areas, but their resources are also managed by governments, so that's also really, really good, making sure that they're all happy and healthy in that regard. So really, really awesome fish. Again, done by Leaf Buffzoo and Fishing Planet. So as I mentioned, a lot of these models are kind of ports from other games and internet models, things like that. And really cool to get to cover two related species in one go. I think that's a really, really awesome, really, really cool fish there. So next, moving on to the grass carp. So these guys are another very interesting fish. They're invasive where I live. So these grass carp they're a species of large herbivorous freshwater fish. They're another species of carp. They live in the Pacific Far East, and they have a native range stretching from northern Vietnam to the Amur River in the Sino-Russian Basin. And these guys have this like long, chubby look to them, as you can see here. They're not very torpedo-like, and they don't have any bardules. They typically grow very rapidly, and young fish are stocked in spring at about 20 centimeters or 7.9 inches, will reach over 45 centimeters or 18 inches by the fall. Their typical length is generally about 60 to 100 centimeters or 23 to 39 inches, so about a meter or so is a large one. Their maximum length, though, is up to 2 meters or about 6 feet 6 inches, and they get up to about 45 kilograms or 99 pounds. So in terms of their ecology, they tend to live in lakes, ponds, brackish, black waters, in large rivers, preferring slow water and standing water bodies with lots of vegetation for them to graze on. In the wild, they tend to spawn in fast-moving rivers, and their eggs, which are slightly heavier than the water, will develop while drifting downstream and kept in suspension by turbulence. And grass carp actually require long rivers for the survival of their eggs and very young fish, and they will die if they sink to the bottom. So in terms of their diet, these guys, as you can kind of implied by their name, the grass carp, these guys typically feed on aquatic plants, both higher and lower kind of terrestrial vegetation and higher aquatic plants, but they will also eat detritus, insects, and invertebrates and things like that. They eat up to 3 times their own body weight daily, and they tend to thrive in small lakes and backwaters that provide a lot of vegetation. And according to one study, they typically live for about 5 to 9 years, with the oldest surviving carp living 11 years, and there's a thriving population that has passed the 15-year mark. So very, very awesome. So they tend to be doing okay. So they are an introduced species. As I mentioned, they lived like in Central and Northern Asia. These guys have been introduced in places all over the world, so such as Japan, the Philippines, Poland, Serbia, New Zealand, South Africa, Australia, Romania, like there's a big list, Argentina, and they've been known to spawn and create many self-sustaining populations. And in the United States, the first fish were imported from Taiwan, and they kind of be used as plant introductions because they want to try and use them as a biocontrol for lots of aquatic vegetation. And it does work to some extent, but they can become an invasive species where they are introduced, so it's often very, very careful about that, of course. Let's see if we can find one swimming around. There we are. But yeah, really, really awesome fish. And as I mentioned, they use as weed control, and they were introduced in New Zealand for that reason. And these guys have proven that they've got these pretty good at controlling aquatic plants, though they have to be very, very careful because, as I mentioned, they are an invasive species and can hurt native species. So usually when they are introduced to an area, they've got to be very, very careful about it. But it is shown to be successful to some extent. And they are known to be fishes because they're large and strong fighters. They can be hooked on a line, and they can be difficult to catch via angling, but they can be a bit aggressive, things like that. And they can be quite good for fishing. And the record for a grass carp with caught on a line and hook is about 39.7 kilograms or 87 pounds. That was caught in 2009 in Bulgaria. And they're also a popular bow fish where it's legal. They're really cool fish to go hunt, and they're popular sport fish in those areas. And while these populations are managed through stocking as a biocontrol method for noxious weeds, fishermen are typically able to return any catch the water alive and unharmed. So yeah, they kind of, where they are released, they're typically forming a role, but obviously introduced populations are not very good, or say sometimes can self-sustain themselves and obviously hurt native species. But anyway, we're going to be moving on. This one was also done by Leaf Buffzoo and Fishing Planet. And now we're moving on from the lakes and rivers to the deep oceans and marine areas. We're going to be having a look at the white-spotted pufferfish. So really, really cool little fish here. So this one is done by Leaf, Buffzoo, and is ported from the game Beyond Blue. So the white-spotted puffer is very similar to most other pufferfish. These guys tend to be a medium to large-sized pufferfish. They get up to about 50 centimeters long. And you can see they're light grayish in color, to grayish yellow, as you can see on their body here. And they get their name, the white-spotted pufferfish, because they have these white spots along their body here, which is kind of obvious, but anyway. And they also have these white dorsal fins and pectoral fins with a little bit of yellow in there that kind of just radiates into it. So the shoulder of these guys also has a contrasting white and grey lines, as you kind of see here. And they have these dark lines around here, stuff like that, and a little bit of blue around their eyes as well. Really, really interesting fish. And it's very similar to most other fish. Pufferfish, like the very famous porcupine fish, they can blow themselves up, fill themselves up with water and appear big and dangerous to say, hey, don't mess with me, I'm much bigger, and actually also makes predators harder to catch them. And they're also venomous, or poisonous, you could say, and a lot of people are going to be very careful with consuming pufferfish because it can potentially kill you because it's poisonous and very, very poisonous. And a lot of people tend to avoid them. And in terms of their behavior as an adult, they can be somewhat aggressive and territorial. And this is partly due to also, as well, they're being solitary and nocturnal. So they tend to sit to themselves, do their own thing, defend a territory, and defend it quite violently. And in these habitats, they typically live from the Indo-Pacific area, including the Red Sea, to the Eastern Pacific Ocean. And they typically live at depths between 3 and 35 meters. And their habitats include things such as reefs, lagoons, estuaries, and tide pools with all sorts of different corals and things. They tend to quite like that since they've got a big beak that allows them to eat things. And they typically will eat corals, algae, sponges, crabs, starfish, krill, and silversides, basically anything that's hard. They're durophagous, so that means they like to eat hard-shelled things. So basically, if you're in a coral reef for these guys, there's lots of food for them, so they're quite generalist in that regard. And a really, really awesome fish. I do like the white-spotted puffer. It looks really, really nice. So we got another awesome fish here. Now we're going to be moving on to the next one here. We've got the Atlantic wolffish done by Leaf, Buffzoo, and I believe, I can't remember the other one, but it's definitely a port. So we've got a really cool wolffish here. Pretty awesome. So these guys are also known as the sea wolf or the sea cat or the wolf eel, things like that. They've got lots of common names. These guys, as you can see, they've got a generally quite long body here, and they look like small benillies. The maximum size recorded for these guys is about 1.5 meters long, or about 5 feet, and about 18 kilograms, or 40 pounds. And you can see they've got this quite smooth body, and these rudimentary scales are even like embedded in their skin. That looks hidden. It looks very, very long, and they actually have quite a varying color. They can be like purplish brown, purple gray to dull olives colors, and they have this long eel-like body, and they kind of swim like an eel as well. They kind of undulate their body like an eel would, and really, really awesome. And you can see here they've got this quite distinguishing feature here. That's kind of, they've got this extensive teeth structure that looks like all sorts of different teeth though in there. They've got big, large, like fang-like teeth. There's about 4 to 6 of them on the both lower and upper jaw. And between them, there's 3 rows of crutching teeth, like molars. It's like very almost mammal-like. That's where they kind of get their name, the wolffish, because they've got crushing teeth and large puncturing teeth, kind of like a wolf, which is really, really awesome. And in terms of their habitat, they typically live around the west and east coast of the Atlantic. So they can be found from like Greenland, Newfoundland, and Nova Scotia up to Cape Cod. And then they can be found in Iceland as well, and then around like parts of Europe, so like United Kingdom, the White Sea, Russia as well, lots of the Nordic countries that can be typically found around there. And in terms of their habitat, they're primarily stationary fish. I know they're probably going to go for feed now, but that's okay. They typically live in a small area and a little small rocky home, and they love it down there. They are benthic dwellers, so they live on the ocean floor, and they like to live in nooks and crannies and small caves and things like that. And they like cold water. They live in depths between 20 to 500 meters, or 66 to 1,600 feet. And they're typically found in waters in between -1 to 11 degrees Celsius, or 30 to 52 degrees Fahrenheit. And since they can live in near freezing waters, these guys actually have antifreeze in their blood, a natural antifreeze that helps their blood pump and not get frozen in their bodies. And there's other three related species: the Asian, Northern, and Southern Atlantic, and spotted wolffish live in the North Atlantic. Well, these guys have a loose gelatinous fur. These guys are kind of not fur, flesh. These guys are a little bit different than those guys, of course. And in terms of their diet, as you can kind of see, they tend to, with these big conical teeth and these crushing jaws, they tend to feed on hard-shelled things, so like echinoderms, crustaceans, sea clams, hermit crabs, sea urchins, things like that. And they're actually quite important for regulating populations of sea urchins and green crabs as well, so that's pretty interesting. And in terms of their reproduction, they reproduce pretty weirdly compared to a lot of other fish. These guys will fertilize the eggs, distinguish them from many fish. Instead of the female will depositing their eggs in the open ocean to the male to fertilize, and then continue on their way. They're actually internally fertilized, and the male wolffish will stay with the nest and protect the eggs for as long as 4 months until the brood is strong enough to gain independence and kind of go off and do their own thing. The eggs typically are about 6 to 5.5 millimeters in diameter, which is among the largest of fish eggs. And they're laid on the ocean floor, often in shoal waters, and typically in loose clumps surrounded by seaweed and stones. And they reach sexual maturity late at about 6 years old, so they're quite a long-lived, slow-growing fish. And that obviously leads into their conservation. Obviously, since they can be a commercial fish, they are a species of concern because they sometimes often get caught as bycatch and obviously caught as food as well. It's declined a lot, though, particularly 95% loss in bycatch as well, so that's kind of a good thing. And they're considered a species of concern because they often get caught in these nets and things like that. And some populations are typically considered endangered. But overall, they're considered data deficient. Some populations are endangered. They potentially could be near vulnerable to threatened in their range. But we really just don't have the data to really show what their populations are like. But they are considered a species of concern because they often get caught in bycatch. Though I don't think they're particularly a good eating fish, but people have just got to be careful and educate and make sure people don't take too many of these guys from the ocean so they can grow up and live their lives and all that. So yeah, we're moving on. We're taking a break from all these fishies. We're going to have a look at the snowy egret done by Ginger Toast, who always has done a wonderful job with these egrets and birds going on. So that's really, really awesome. We have got here this snowy egret. How cute. So the snowy egret is this small white heron and is kind of the American counterpart to the old world little egret, and has been, which is actually established in the Bahamas, as a side fact. So these guys are entirely white apart from their yellow feet and their long beak and black legs as well. But typically they're just all white, where they get their name, the snowy egret. And they have these long shaggy plumes, as you can see here. They're known as algerets, I believe how you say that. And in terms of their body weight and measurements, these guys typically get to about 22 to 26 inches or 56 to 66 centimeters in length. Their body weight's about 370 grams or 13 ounces, and their wingspan is about 39.4 inches or about 100 centimeters. In terms of their habitat, they typically live in North, Central, and South America, where they're present all round in South America, where they can range as far south as Chile and Argentina. They also occur throughout the year in the West Indies, Florida, and coastal regions of North and Central America. And though in the southern parts of the US, they tend to be a bit more migratory. They breed in California, Nevada, Utah, Mexico, Louisiana, Mississippi, places like that. And they, as I mentioned, they're more migratory. And they typically love wetland areas, so like marshes, rivers, lakesides, pools, estuaries, and salt marshes, though they're not typically found in high altitudes. And on a step of talking to them about being vagrants and often flying and doing their own thing, they've been found to be vagrants in Iceland, Scotland, and the Azores, along with Europe. And they've also been recorded in South Africa, so it's also pretty interesting. It shows how far birds can go sometimes, and even animals sometimes, yeah. But in terms of their diet, they're not too different from many other species of egrets and things like that. They feed on fish, crustaceans, insects, small reptiles, frogs, snails, toads, and lots of different worms, where they will often stalk the prey in shallow water and often running or shuffling them with their feet. And then they will maybe hover and then dip fish by flying and just dipping their head above the surface to catch them sometimes. They typically catch them while they're walking around like this in the water. And snow egrets may also stand still and wait to ambush prey, and they have also been observed to hunt insects disturbed by domestic animals in open fields. And they'll often sometimes forage in mixed species groups with other herons and egrets and things like that. So in terms of breeding, these guys will breed in mixed colonies that include great egrets, night herons, tricolored herons, little blue herons, castle egrets, glossy eyeballs, and rosette spoonbills, ibises, I mean. So yeah, they typically like to breed with other species. The male will establish a territory and start building the nest in the tree with vines and thick undergrowth as well. They will attract a mate with an elaborate courtship display that includes them dipping their head up and down, raising their bill, lots of aerial diving and displays, and anything to try and woo the female. And the immediate vicinity is defended from other birds, and the female will finish the construction of the nest by the materials brought by the male. And it's typically constructed from twigs, rushes, sedges, grasses, mosses, and similar materials, and can get up to about 15 inches or 38 centimeters across. Usually about 6 pale bluish-green eggs are laid after about 24 days, and the young are atrisal and will hatch after about 24 days, and the young are atrisal, so they are covered in white down when they're born, and they will first leave the nest about 22 days old and kind of go off and do their own thing. So luckily this species is considered least concern now, but in the early 20th century, they were extensively hunted for their beautiful plumes, which are often on fashionable ladies' hats, which is kind of sad. But the trade was ended at about 1910 in North America, but it continued in Central and South America for a while. But since then, their populations have recovered, and they've got a very wide range, and they have a large population, so they seem to be pretty much considered least concern, so there's no worries of immediate extinction for these guys. So another great conservation story, of course. And really, really awesome birds, if I do say so myself. Really, really beautiful animals. But yeah, so we're taking a break from our birds, going back to the sharks. This one was done by Ginger Toast. This next one's a swell shark from Leaf, Buffzoo, and Beyond Blue again. So these guys are a cool little species of cat shark, as we can kind of see here. Look at these beautiful guys here. So these guys are found in tropical and subtropical waters of the Eastern Pacific Ocean from between Central California to southern Mexico, with another population off the coast of Chile. And as of defense, these guys will often expand and double their size by swallowing water, like a pufferfish, so where they kind of get their name, the swell shark. They found in southern Mexico, as I mentioned, something like that. There's an initial population off the coast of Chile. They can be found at depths of about 5 meters to 457 meters, but most commonly found at 5 to 37 meters. And they're often found around algae-covered bottoms, and they hide in crevices during the day. I don't know why this is considered Beyond Blue when these guys actually live in the Eastern Pacific Ocean, so around California, Mexico. Might just be a wrong label or something, but whatever. In terms of the description, as you can kind of see here, these guys are typically about 90 centimeters long with a maximum length of about 110 centimeters, so about a meter. They have these large flat heads with these golden eyes, as you kind of see here, with this yellow-brown coloration that helps them to hide. And their spots actually cover their underside that is not present on their fins. And usually younger sharks are lighter in color and they get darker. Younger sharks are lighter than the adults, and they obviously darken as they age. And the gills of these sharks, as you can see, they're very small and tight. And every swell shark has about 55 to 60 teeth in their little jaws there. And they typically have smooth smooth cusps, but they can have as many as 5, and the middle cusp is the longest. So in terms of their ecology, these guys are nocturnal and sleep in rock crevices during the day, and where their appearance allows them to stay camouflaged. And they're very sociable animals and common seen sleeping on top of next to each other and other sharks as well. In terms of reproduction, these guys are oviparous. So these guys will lay eggs. They lay 2 green to amber flattened eggs at a time, with fertilization occurring inside their bodies. The egg cases are typically attached to kelps on the reef with tendrils, and it's been suggested that the length of the tendrils depends on the amount of surf action in the region, so places with a lot of surf, they'll have more secure tendrils. And after producing this egg case, there's no parental care provided, so the female just lays her eggs and just kind of goes off and does her own thing. And the egg case contains an embryo that's about 2.5 centimeters long, or a little under an inch, or up to 5.1 centimeters long, or 2 inches, so just these big sizes. This embryo will be fed solely by the yolk until it hatches, and the gestation period typically depends on the water temperature, but is generally about 9 to 12 months. And pups will have a double row of enlarged dermal tentacles that help them escape the egg case, and then they will be approximately about 15 centimeters long when they're born and completely self-sufficient, so they can go off and do their own thing. Now, in terms of their diet, these guys are hunt at night for bony fish, mollusks, and crustaceans, and they will eat prey that is dead or alive, and they feed either by sucking into their mouths or by waiting motionless on the sea floor with their mouth open, waiting for it to encounter. So they'll lay down and wait for something nice and bony, or crustaceans or something like that, and just suck it up in their mouths and just eat them. And they've also been found to look for food in lobster traps as well, so pretty interesting little sharks, if you do say so myself. Really cute little guys. In terms of defense, as I mentioned, they will, when they're feeling threatened, they will bend their body into a U shape, they'll grab its tail fin with its mouth and suck in water, and during this will make it look bigger and more dangerous, and also makes it harder for predators to get their mouth around and to bite them as well. And they're also capable of using air or water to swell up, and they will be stored in their stomach until released. When they think out air, they actually make a dog-like bark, and they're non-aggressive and considered harmless to humans, so that's good. So usually it's just all for show. And these guys recently have actually been shown that they have biofluorescence, so that means they actually kind of have light coming off them. So the biofluorescence presently functions as communication between these different individuals, individual shell sharks, swell sharks, I mean, and these guys have them set into like a bromated compounds that are able to be synthesized as well by lots of different chemicals and things. And it's kind of like biofluorescence is really interesting, and it's really cool that these species have them, and they don't really know how it came to be that they got this biofluorescence, but it's still really awesome, and they may actually use it to communicate. And in terms of their conservation status, there's no particular fisheries particularly trying to catch these sharks, but they can get caught in lobster and crab traps, gill nets and trawls. They're not typically consumed by humans, but they are common in public aquariums, since they can live a long time in captivity. So they're typically considered a least concern shark, but I still think they're really cool and cute. Good they are least concern, and other species we don't have to worry about going to become extinct. And that was done by Leaf Buffzoo and Beyond Blue. And I do remember it wasn't Beyond Blue, so it must be kind of the wrong habitat. But anyway, we've got, last but certainly not least, from Leaf Buffzoo and also in Beyond Blue as well, we've got the Pacific Sleeper Shark. So a really, really cool animal here. So let's have a look at you, so you can find one swimming around. Look at how beautiful you are. So the Pacific Sleeper Shark is a sleeper shark that's found in the North Pacific, on continental shelves and slopes in Arctic and temperate waters, from surface to about 2,000 meters or 6,600 feet deep. And records from southern oceans tend to be misidentification of its relatives. In terms of their feeding habits, these guys are typically both scavengers and predators, and they can glide through the water without making much noise or hydrodynamic noise and little body movement, which makes them very stealthy predators. And they actually have large mouths that allow them to essentially inhale prey, and their teeth will cut up any pieces too large for them to swallow. They also show a characteristic rolling motion of their head when feeding. And only in Alaska has their diet been studied, with most sharks' contents remaining of a giant Pacific octopus. And they've also been known to feed on teleost fish, or bottom-dwelling fish, such as flounders, pollocks, shrimps, hermit crabs, flounders, things like that. And large sleeper sharks have been found to feed on fast-swimming prey as well, such as squids, Pacific salmon, and harbor porpoises. So harbor porpoises are not safe. The diet of these guys seems to broaden as they increase in size, and even a female in Trinidad in California, it was about 3.7 meters long, actually was shown to feed on mostly like giant squid and things, which is pretty cool. And Sleeper sharks in Alaska, from about 2 to 3 meters, will typically feed on flounders and pollocks and cephalopods, while sleeper sharks about 3 to 4 meters will typically consume on cephalopods and teleosts as well as marine mammals. And they'll actually also eat things such as juvenile stellar sea lions. So quite a varied diet as they get larger. There's very little known about the early life of these sharks. It's believed these guys will produce eggs that hatch inside the mother's body, so they're ovoviviparous, and the gestation time is unknown, but litter size is thought to be about 10 pups, and these babies at birth are about 42 centimeters, or 1.38 feet in length when they're born, or even less than that. And as you can see here, they're quite a large shark. They're definitely not on the smaller side. The average mature size is about 3.6 meters, or about 12 feet long, and about 318 to 363 kilograms, or 700 to 800 pounds, with the largest verified specimen getting about 4.4 meters, or 14 feet, and weighing about 888 kilograms, or just shy of 2,000 pounds, though they could potentially reach up to about 7 meters, or 23 feet or more, with a report of a giant one that's found around Japan that was filmed and was specifically about 7 meters, but not verified, of course. These guys also have some very awesome adaptations, similar to its relative, the Greenland shark. These guys, due to living to such frigid depths so that are really cold, they actually do not have squalene in their liver oil. So basically, these low compounds, they basically allow them to stay fluid in the lowest temperatures possible. And they also store very little urea in their skin as well, so that's another adaptation to help them survive in the deep water. And the presence of these kind of ureas and pressures as well is both in teleost and elasmobranch fish, so that's fish like these guys, have been found to increase with depth. So because food is relatively scarce in the deep sea, these guys are able to store food in their quite large stomach. These guys are also able to produce a powerful bite due to their short and transverse shape, and the upper jaw is kind of like spike-like, where the lower jaw has cusps and overlapping bases that allows them to eat and grab and saw food that's too large to swallow as well. And they also have quite a short caudal fin, and it allows them to store energy for fast and violent bursts of speed that allow them to catch prey. So that allows them to catch fast-moving prey when they're larger, like porpoises and sea lions and things like that. And really awesome, in 2015, there was a Pacific sleeper shark that was actually filmed near the Solomon Islands underneath an active volcano. And the shark was able to survive in water with the high acidity and high temperatures. So that's very, very interesting, and a really, really awesome fish. So these guys are also considered near threatened, with a lot of the issues that plague sharks applying to these guys, so like bycatch, overfishing for their food sources. Plus, they're not very well known. They're quite deep sea sharks. You don't see them often. Also, another issue is climate change, since they kind of live in cooler waters, but they seem to be doing okay. Near threatened is okay by most metrics, but really, really awesome. So there's mainly all fish today, but a little bit of a shorter episode. I don't mind. So yeah, I think this would be a great place to end the video. So yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified uploading anything. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.